My mother had one rule my whole life, and that is never stare at the porcelain doll on her dresser, and I caught her talking to it every single night at 2 a.m., calling it Agatha. My mother had one rule about her bedroom that she never once explained. She told me never to stare at the doll on her dresser. Not don't touch it. Not don't play with it. Don't stare at it. I was 7 when she first said it. The doll was about 18 inches tall with a white porcelain face, dark brown human hair, a blue dress with tiny buttons, and painted black shoes. Its glass eyes were green and caught the light in a way that made them look wet. I asked her where she got it, and she said her mother gave it to her and her mother's mother before that. I asked if it was valuable, and she said it was not the kind of thing you put a price on. That was all she would ever say. I followed the rule for years automatically, without thinking about why. When I was 13, I woke up around 2 a.m. because I heard my mother talking. Her bedroom was next to mine and the walls were thin. She was speaking quietly but steadily, like she was having a full conversation with someone. I pressed my ear to the wall. She was saying things like, I know, I understand, not yet, she's not ready. I could not hear anyone responding. A few weeks later, I caught it again, and this time I heard her say the name Agatha. Agatha, I've kept my end, please. I started staying awake on purpose to track it, every night between 1 and 3 a.m., never missing once in the 4 months I watched. When I was 14, my mother left for a weekend, and I went into her room and looked directly at the doll's face for the first time. The eyes had depth to them, layers, like looking into a marble, except the layers seemed to shift when the light changed. I picked it up. It was heavier than it should have been. An 18-inch porcelain doll should weigh maybe 2 or 3 pounds. This one felt like at least 8. I turned it over and found a small panel held shut with 2 brass clasps. Inside was a roll of cloth tied with black thread. I unrolled it. Linen, with handwriting in ink so old it had turned brown. The writing was not in English, but at the bottom was a list of names in different handwriting, different inks, different time periods. 14 names. The newest at the bottom was my mother's, in her own handwriting. Above hers was my grandmother's. Next to each name was a second name. Next to my grandmother's, it said Agatha. Next to my mother's, it also said Agatha. I put everything back exactly as I found it. When my mother came home, I didn't tell her, but I started watching her more carefully. She was 52 years old and she looked 40. My grandmother had been the same way. In photos from her 70s, she barely looked 55. I went to the public library and spent weeks tracing the names on that list. 3 of them I could track through public records. All 3 lived significantly longer than average for their time. One reportedly reached 112 in a century where most women didn't make 60. All 3 had daughters. Every single one. When I was 16, my mother sat me down at the kitchen table and told me it was time we talked about the doll. She said Agatha was very old and very patient, and that one day the doll would be mine. There was a conversation I'd need to have with it and a promise I'd need to make. She said it like I was inheriting a car or a ring, but I saw her face when she said the word promise. Her mouth smiled, but her eyes didn't. I needed to know what the promise actually was and what happened if I said no. Ruth thought I'd nod along like every daughter before me. She didn't know I'd already opened the doll. She didn't know I'd already read the names. I had questions she wasn't ready for. So I sat there at that kitchen table and I said, what exactly is the promise? She folded her hands on the table and pressed her lips tight and said, you promised to take care of her, to speak with her, to keep the line going. I let that sit. It sounded like describing a pet or a plant, but I knew what speak with her looked like at 2 a.m. I pushed. Keep the line going how? Her jaw got tight. She said, by having a daughter, and giving her the doll when it's time. She was asking me to build my entire life around it. I kept my face still. What does Agatha give in return? Ruth reached up and touched her own face, ran her fingers along her jaw and neck slowly, like she was showing me something. She said, you've seen the photos of your grandmother. You've seen me. We are healthy. We are strong. We last. Youth, health, time. More time than a normal person should have. You give Agatha your nights, your daughter, your freedom, and she gives you years. I understood it. Then I asked the real question. What happens if I say no? Ruth went completely still, not like she was thinking, like she had turned to stone. The kitchen was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking. Then she stood, pushed her chair in, and said, you won't say no. I said it again. She turned to the counter with her back to me. There has never been a no. Not in over 300 years. That's all you need to know. I pushed harder and she turned around and I saw something on her face I had never seen before in my entire life. Not anger, fear, but she was wearing it like authority, pulling it over herself like a mask. She said, I am your mother and I am telling you this is how it works. This conversation is over. Her hands were shaking. She tucked them behind her back, but I saw them. She walked out and her bedroom door closed. I sat at the table alone. She physically could not bring herself to tell me what happened if someone broke the chain. Whatever the answer was, it was bad enough that she couldn't say it out loud to her own daughter. I went to my room and pulled out the notebook I'd kept since I was 14. I'd written down every name from the linen scroll. 3 traced. All had daughters. All lived way longer than they should have. But then I stopped on something I'd barely thought about since writing it. The 6th name. Next to it, I'd made a note in the margin. Mark next to name, small cross or X, different ink. Every other name followed the same format, but the 6th had something added, like someone came back later and marked it. Only one of 14. Something had happened to that woman that was different from all the others. I got to the library the next morning and found her in a regional record from the 1800s after almost 2 hours. Real, she had a daughter. But when I tried to follow the daughter's trail, everything stopped. No marriage record, no death record, no continuation. Every other woman on that list had a clear line going forward, generation to generation. This daughter walked off the edge of the map. Then in a collection of letters from a local historical society, I found a brief mention. A neighbor had written to a relative about a woman who had refused the family obligation and left her mother's household. She said no. She left. Within 2 years, the same neighbor wrote another letter describing her as looking decades older than her age, suffering from something no doctor could explain. She died at 31 years old. According to the letter, she looked like a woman of 80 when they buried her. I sat there in the library and felt the shape of the whole thing settle over me like a net. Agatha gives time, youth, years that don't belong to you. When the chain breaks, when someone refuses, she takes it all back, not slowly, all of it at once, like a debt coming due with interest. That night I heard Ruth through the wall, and tonight it was different. Her voice was fast, something tight in it, close to panic. I pressed pressed my ear to the wall. She was saying, "She's asking questions. I told you she would. She's not like I was. She's not going to just accept it." A long pause. Ruth wasn't filling it with words. She was listening. Then, I know, but she's my daughter." Her voice cracked on daughter. And then very quietly, "I'll handle it." She was reporting on me, giving updates about me to a thing inside a porcelain doll, and she'd promised to handle it. I needed to talk to someone who'd been through this before Ruth. My grandmother Karen was still alive, living 2 hours away, and I hadn't seen her in over a year. Ruth always had a reason to cancel visits. I was starting to understand why. The next morning, I waited until Ruth's car pulled out, then dialed Karen's number from the address book in the kitchen drawer. She picked up on the second ring. I didn't ease into it. "Grandma, I need to ask you about the doll." The line went quiet. Then she said very carefully, "Your mother told you." I said she'd told me some of it, that I'd need to make a promise, and that she wouldn't tell me what happens if I don't. Karen exhaled long and slow, and when she spoke again, she sounded older than I remembered. She said Ruth made her promise at 18. She made hers at 17. "Agatha decides when you're ready." I pushed. "And if I don't agree?" She went quiet. "Then, there was a girl, a long time ago." She said no. I told her I already found her. The library. The neighbor's letter. Died at 31, looked 80. Karen said softly, "It's not a punishment. It's just what happens when the connection breaks. Agatha gives, and when you step away, she takes back what she gave. Not just from you, from the whole line." I felt something shift under me. "What do you mean the whole line?" Karen said, "If you refuse, it doesn't just affect you. It affects your mother. It affects me. It unravels." I felt my whole body go cold. Not just my choice, my consequence. Ruth, Karen, everyone. If I said no, Agatha would take back everything she'd ever given from every woman still alive in the line, all at once. I said, "Why didn't anyone just tell me this? Why didn't Mom explain it like you're explaining it right now?" Karen sighed, and it was the saddest sound I'd ever heard come out of another person. She said, "Because your mother believes it should feel like a choice, not a threat. She wants you to say yes because you want to, not because you're scared." I almost laughed. I said, "But it's not really a choice. If saying no kills you and Mom." The line went so quiet, I pulled the phone away to check. Still connected. Then Karen said, in a voice so small it barely sounded like her at all, "No, it's not really a choice. It never was. Saying no didn't free me. It killed the people I loved." When Ruth came home that evening and walked into my room without knocking, she was holding the phone bill. She looked at me with an expression that was completely flat. No anger, no sadness. Something worse. Control. Total, deliberate control. Like every muscle in her face had been placed there on purpose. She said, "You called your grandmother." I didn't deny it. She said I went behind her back. I said, "Because you won't tell me the truth." Her jaw tightened. "The truth is that I have spent my entire life protecting you, and you are making that very difficult." Then she walked out and I heard her go into her bedroom and heard the dresser drawer open. I got up and watched from the hallway. Ruth lifted the doll gently, the way you'd pick up a baby, wrapped it in cloth, walked past me without looking, went through the kitchen, out the front door, and straight to her car. She placed the wrapped doll in the trunk, closed it, locked it with the key fob. The car beeped once. She came back inside and said, "You're not ready. Agatha and I agree. We'll try again when you've grown up." Then she went to the kitchen and started making dinner like nothing had happened. She thought removing it would slow me down, but she forgot I had one more person I could reach. Vera, Ruth's older sister. Ruth never mentioned Vera in any of this. Not once. I needed to find out why. The next day, I borrowed a friend's phone at school. Vera picked up warm and bright, asking how school was going, how I was eating. I let her talk for a minute and then said, "Aunt Vera, can I ask you about Mom's doll? The porcelain one on her dresser?" The change was instant, like flipping a light switch off. Every bit of warmth drained out of her voice. The line went quiet and then she said, flat and careful, "Who told you about the doll?" I told her Ruth had started the conversation with me, that I'd been doing my own research, that I had questions nobody in the family would answer straight. Vera listened without interrupting. When I was done, there was a pause, heavy like she was deciding something. Then she said something I did not see coming. "The doll was supposed to come to me. I'm the older sister. I was supposed to be next in the line, but I said no when I was 19, and your grandmother gave it to Ruth instead." I stood against the side of the school building and felt everything go cold. Vera said no. My aunt, Ruth's own sister. She was the break in the chain. Karen skipped Vera because Vera looked at the whole thing and said no, and Karen had to scramble and give the doll to Ruth to keep the line from falling apart. That's why Ruth never mentioned Vera. That's why visits got canceled. I asked what happened after she refused. She said, "Nothing." At first, I thought all of it was nonsense, superstition, a creepy doll with a creepy name. Then I started aging, fast. I was 22 and people thought I was 35. By the time I was 30, I looked 50. Doctors ran every test. Nothing came back wrong. No diagnosis, no disease, no condition they could point to and say, "That's the problem. Here's the treatment." My body was just accelerating, like someone hit fast forward and couldn't find the stop button. I asked how she looked now. Vera laughed, and it was the emptiest sound I'd ever heard, like the shape of a laugh with nothing inside it. She said, "I'm 48. I look 70. Your mother is 52 and looks 40. You do the math." Then she said, "I survived because your grandmother gave the doll to Ruth before the line fully broke. Ruth made the promise. The chain continued. But once you're born into this, Agatha already has a claim on you. Refusing doesn't free you. It just means you pay the price without the benefit." When I got home, I went straight to my room and sat on my bed and stared at the wall between my room and Ruth's room. For the first time sitting there, I didn't feel angry at Ruth. I felt sorry for her. She'd been 18 years old when Karen sat her down and she said yes, not because she wanted to, but because her older sister was already falling apart and someone had to keep the chain going or everyone paid. And then she spent the next 34 years sitting in a dark room every single night talking to something she was afraid of, knowing one day she'd have to do the same thing to her own daughter. I sat there in the growing dark and I felt myself sinking into something that felt a lot like giving up. And then I heard it. A voice. Not from Ruth's room, not through the wall, from inside my own room. So faint I almost didn't catch it, like a whisper coming through water, close enough that I could almost feel the breath behind it. It said my name, once, clear and quiet and patient, like it had all the time in the world. Then silence. The doll was locked in Ruth's car outside, and something had just said my name from a place I couldn't see. Agatha didn't need the porcelain shell to reach me. She never had. The doll was just a vessel, a convenient place to keep the scroll and the name. names. She was bigger than that, older. She'd been here every night I'd lain in this bed. I stood up. I was done being the question mark at the end of a 300-year-long sentence. There was only one conversation left to have, and I was going to have it on my terms. I waited until 1 a.m. The house was completely still. I walked down the dark hallway knowing which boards creaked, lifted Ruth's car keys off the hook by the door, and stepped outside. The concrete was cold under my bare feet. I walked to the car and pressed the key fob once so it would unlock without honking. The trunk clicked open. The doll sat wrapped in dark cloth in the middle of it. I unwrapped it right there. The white porcelain face, the brown human hair, the little blue dress with the tiny buttons, the painted black shoes, and those eyes. Those green glass eyes catching the street lamp light, deep and wet looking, layered like something alive was staring up from inside them. I sat down on the driveway and set the doll in my lap. Then I did the thing I'd been told never to do since I was 7 years old. I stared directly into those eyes and said out loud, I know you can hear me. I know what you are. I'm not going to whisper to you through a wall. If you want to talk to me, talk to me. The night stayed still. A minute passed, maybe two. The silence was thick enough that I could hear my own pulse. I almost started to think I'd imagined everything. The whisper in my room, the voice that said my name, all of it. Then I felt the weight of the doll change, heavier, like something inside had shifted and moved closer to the surface. My fingers tightened around the doll's body without me deciding to do it. And the eyes, those layers I'd seen when I was 14, the depth that made them look like marbles with something living at the center, those layers turned, slowly, like something that had been resting at the bottom was rising up to look at me. I did not look away. I said, I read the names. I know about the woman who said no. I know what happened to my Aunt Vera. I know what you take when someone breaks the chain. The air around me got thicker, heavier, like the temperature had risen several degrees even though it was the middle of the night. The street lamp light seemed dimmer, like something was standing between me and it. I said, I want to know what the promise actually is, not what my mother told me, the real one. And then, from behind me, Ruth's voice. Put her down, right now. I turned. She was standing in the doorway in her bathrobe, her face white, not pale, white. Every drop of blood drained. Her hands gripped the door frame and her eyes were fixed on the doll in my lap, with an expression I had never seen on another human being. Pure, open, unfiltered fear. Not fear of me, fear of what I was doing. She said it again and her voice cracked. You don't know what you're doing. You can't just demand things from her. That's not how this works. I didn't move. I said, then tell me how it works, Mom. The real version, right now. She let go of the door frame and walked toward me. She got to where I was sitting and she didn't stand over me. She knelt down, right there on the driveway, in her bathrobe, at 1 a.m. She looked at the doll and then at me, and her voice was so quiet I almost couldn't hear it. She said, the promise is your life, not all at once, piece by piece. Every night you speak with her, you give her a little more of yourself, your time, your energy, your years, and in return she gives you years back, more than you gave. You age slower, you live longer, but you are never free. You talk to her every single night until you pass her to your daughter, and then your daughter starts. She said it like she was reading from a script she'd memorized a long time ago and never wanted to say out loud. Her hands were curled into fists in her lap. I looked at her and said, you're not doing this because you love tradition. You're doing this because you're scared. Ruth broke. There's no other word for it. She covered her face with both hands, and her whole body bent forward, and she made a sound I had never heard come out of my mother before. Not a sob exactly. More like the sound a person makes when they finally stop pretending they're okay. She said, of course I'm scared. I've been scared since I was 18 years old. Your grandmother sat me down just like I sat you down, and I said yes because I didn't know what else to say. And every night since then, I have sat in that room, and I have talked to that thing, and I have kept my end because I was terrified of what would happen if I stopped. She took her hands away from her face, and her eyes were red and swollen and completely open in a way I had never seen before. No mask, no control, no authority dressed up as love, just Ruth, scared, tired, honest. She said, I don't talk to her because I want to. I talk to her because I don't have a choice anymore. And I brought you into this world knowing I'd have to do the same thing to you. Her voice broke on the last part. She swallowed and said, that is the worst thing I have ever done. I sat there holding the doll and felt the full weight of it hit me. 300 years of women, sitting alone in dark rooms at 2 a.m., whispering to something they were afraid of, giving pieces of themselves away night after night after night, then sitting their daughters down at kitchen tables and starting the whole thing over. Karen did it to Ruth. Ruth was doing it to me. And if I said yes, one day I'd do it to a daughter I hadn't even had yet. I wasn't ready to decide everything. Not tonight. Not like this. Not on a cold driveway at 1 a.m. with tears on my mother's face and the weight of 14 dead women's names pressing down on my lap. I said, I'm not saying yes tonight. Ruth started to lean forward and I cut her off. And I'm not saying no. I'm saying not yet. Not like this. Not because I'm scared and not because you're scared. I picked up the doll and placed it gently on the ground between us. It sat there on the concrete, upright, those green glass eyes catching the streetlight, the little blue dress smooth and still, so small for something that had controlled our family for 3 centuries. I said, if she's really been waiting 300 years, she can wait a little longer. Ruth stared at me. She didn't say anything. She didn't argue. She just looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Not as the next name on the list. Not as the daughter who needed to be managed, but as a person choosing to stand in the middle instead of running to either side. The doll sat between us on the cold concrete. The streetlight made the green glass eyes glow soft and steady, and from somewhere I couldn't point to or locate or explain, I heard it again. That whisper. Not my name this time. Just one word. So faint it was barely there, like breath against the inside of my ear. Warm and close and impossibly patient. Good.